is a 23-year-old Barbadian powerhouse, UNICEF youth advocate, CARICOM youth ambassador, has started the Ashley Lashley Foundation in 2019. That wasn't enough. So she came back in 2020, starting the HEY campaign, which stands for Healthy and Environmentally Friendly Youth. And we had we were just talking about this before the session started. We had some Gen Z activists in a previous session yesterday say how important that was to their activism journey. So we are building connections and impact here. No pressure, Ashley. So great to have you on board with us today as we discuss how people can really use social media to pivot their activism. I guess the reason why I am in this seat, not the hot seat, but the moderation seat, is because 6 years ago when I started Caesar, it was like, okay, what tool do we use to really get Caesar out there? We went on Instagram, and that was a daily, every day, feeding the algorithm, the same sort of wildlife photos on energy, etc. Every single day I was up and looking at time zones. When will be the best time to post this photo? How do I schedule this? For 3 years, I was the only one doing that until we got interns that really took it over and really transformed it. But it was starting from zero, looking at Instagram, 0 followers. And then, you get trapped in this numbers game. And then now we're at 15,000. But how do you really shift from, I am an activist. I want to get my message out there. I want to become a prominent person, not just because I want fame, but I want to make sure that the message that is quite important attached to the issues that I'm passionate about really get out there. So one of the first questions I want to get towards you as we start this session is, what are some of the key ways you see social media playing a role in your foundations, your campaigns, getting your messages out there?
Well, thanks, Maz. And I think as like a climate activist and a young person myself, social media has played a great role within the development of my activism journey, but not only myself, the Ashley Lashley Foundation and that of the HEY campaign and our different messages. And I think too, like the power of social media for activists cannot be overstated, because social media platforms have transformed the way activists, not only myself, can raise awareness, mobilize supporters, and drive social and political change. I remember when I first started my activism journey, I was utilizing social media that much. I was advocating within the school sector, but then as I continued to build a base amongst my peers and more young persons were continuing to advocate for the same causes, we all distinguish that there's a need for a network and build a bigger community. And where can we find that bigger community and audience? That of using different social media platforms. So through social media, what we have realized too is that it gives us a bigger and global reach to continue to advocate and share our messages and stories and causes with persons from all over the world. And in return, through our overall activism communication on various social media platforms, that also allowed us to get different funders reaching out to us, like-minded individuals. Through the HEY campaign, which I started, it looked at amplifying the voices of young persons and spreading that awareness. It also looked at those real-time updates. So I would say, like, for some of the key resources that could really support content creation, I would say that one, throughout the foundation and throughout the HEY campaign, was that of scientific and data research from different climate articles, also looking at the work that other environmental organizations within this space is doing. I find too, when we feature and highlight the work that other young persons and organizations are doing, that also allows us to grow a bigger audience for engagement. But as a young person, of course, too, Matt, I mean, when it comes to social media, that is the platform really where we can continue to hold our government leaders accountable, the business sector accountable for the different policies and the different sustainability practices in which they're implemented within their countries and territories. So it also gives us a young persons a bigger platform to, one, have access to information in which we could continue to advocate and call out persons who are within power.
So that's a really good point, because there's a level of accountability with social media. And of course, as you grow your following, you have this sort of tribe behind you going, go Ashley, go. You have a lot more sort of responsibility, but also authority to be like, well, this is what we think, and this is what you are not doing. And I'm going to tag you politely, probably. And this is what we think you should be pushing policy. This is what you should be doing. And you are becoming a leader in a community, both virtually in cyberspace as well as on the ground in Barbados as well. So what are some things you think are the main guidelines you would give to an activist, a Gen Z activist, or anybody else starting this space to really help them understand that these are the key things you need to have to grow along the way? Because it's a slow thing. You're not going, I think some people live in a fantasy that, I'm going to come out with a viral video and then tomorrow I'm going to have 2 million followers. I mean, you might, but that's probably the small percentage of people who start out there, right? Particularly with climate science. It is not the most sensational topic in terms of having a viral video. So what are some things you think you would tell people trying to get into that space to really help them build their message, their branding, their journey on social media? And it doesn't have to be Instagram.
No, and just a disclaimer, I'm not a social media expert, one, and two, I've never went viral, but what I can say is some recommendations in which I have based on working with my social media team under the foundation and different publicists and PR specialists is that of one, in order to grow an audience, you need to know the message in which you are promoting. You need to find a niche in which you can continue to be creative and stand out to the audience in which you're targeting. We know when it comes to climate and the environment, there's so many different topics that can be highlighted under climate and the environment. So persons need to know where exactly am I going to spread my messages, or who exactly am I targeting within a particular environmental or climate related space. And then after that is choosing the right platforms, because I think for me now, if I started my activism career, I'm actually 24, not 23. But if I started my activism career at 24, I would have started using the social media platform of TikTok, because that is where more young persons are currently active and trying to create different social media messages. But I think too, it all depends on where young persons or Gen Zs in general want to go with their journey. Because if they want to become a climate activist or environmental activist, but still pursuing an environmental degree at a university, then they're also looking to become an environmental professional. So they also have to look at varying platforms like LinkedIn that they could utilize to continue to share stories. And then as an activist, you have to be willing to don't be selfish, one, and be willing to highlight the stories of other persons within the climate and environmental space that are doing positive work. And I'm sure because it's climate and the environment, there's so many positive stories out there. And also stories of persons who have been affected by the climate crisis, which a young person or storyteller within our platforms can continue to highlight. So they need to be consistent, one, because as you said rightfully, you're not going to go viral overnight unless you have like a big partner like Rihanna or another celebrity on board that could amplify your message to a wider audience, you get me? So you have to be consistent. And then even going back to that same like comment with like Rihanna or a celebrity or influencer, as an activist, you should be willing to partner with activist influencers within the space, writing different blog stories, writing different outreach messages to see if someone can hop on a simple IG live with you to talk about a story or a message that you really want to portray to your audience. So collaborations is totally important within this space, I would say.
100%. I mean, we tried to get Rihanna for this, but she said no. That was an absolute joke. I mean, you said so many great things there, right? It's about storytelling. It's about making sure that you have those collaborations. It's about realizing this is not an overnight journey. And it's also about realizing which platform is best going to get your message across. And we've experienced that even in Caesar. You know, we had a discussion. Okay, Threads sounds good because that's more or less a transition from Twitter, and it sort of sticks with what we do. However, are we going to be on TikTok just posting a picture of a beautiful iguana? Is that really going to work? Not necessarily. So we would have to really innovate the way that we disseminate our information and turn that iguana photo into some really viral sort of looking video that probably bounces here and there and then keeps the attention span going just enough for 20 seconds to get that information across. But a lot of our messaging comes through the content below. And you touched on another really good point there, is that as activists, you also have the onus on you to make sure that your information that you're sharing is credible and right. And so you have to do your fact checking. You have to go and make sure that you're saying things that are correct. But talk me through, you said, okay, if you were to start now, you'd probably on TikTok. Talk me through some of the collaborations that have been key for you to really get and amplify your voice. And how did you go about realizing that that was the right campaign and collaboration to have? Was it something that organically just fell in place? Was it something that somebody reached out to you? And you don't have to talk about a particular one. I know I'm putting you in a hot seat here to go in the memory bank to figure out which was the best one. But maybe talk me through one that you sort of remember that was as pivotal to really sort of get your message out where you needed it.
I think honestly, it might be a bit different, and it's kind of interconnected to the social media platform. But I find like attending international conferences and connecting with persons in these spaces who have different organizations, other climate and environmental activists as well, you know, like sitting on different panel discussions and them highlighting like key messages or key like focus lines that you would have said within your discussion, and then creating like a video to amplify within a bigger network works. And I find too, like within those spaces and networking in person actually adds to the types of social media content in which I create through the foundation, even like through the Hey campaign, for instance. It's not really like, I would say last year I participated in COP27. And while being at COP27, I was representing the Hey campaign, of course, and the foundation. But I had my camera, my cell phone, and lots of our Hey ambassadors were present too. I was able to connect to different experts, young leaders within the space. And I just pulled out my my phone and I asked them, do you want to say just a few words about what does climate and health mean to you? Or do you have any stories that you want to share? And there were inclined to record that video for me, and I was able to promote their story messages across the Hey campaign, and they were great. We got a great audience from it. We got great feedback from it. So I would say like creating content is important. One, being within the right spaces is also important. And because you may sit down and plan a whole entire like social media schedule, etc., already content, always be ready to adapt within the environment that you're currently in. I think adapting for me within the different environments that I'm in and trying to amplify not only my voice, but other person's voices within the space, I think that also propelled the audience in which I was able to reach as well. And even like through the Hey campaign, we always message our Hey ambassadors and are like, do you guys have a story that we can amplify? What work are you doing within your communities, etc.? So always be willing again to share other person's messaging. And that's how you can also continue to develop a bigger audience. So yeah.
Yeah, no, those are really, really good points. And yeah, kudos to you going around the room asking people to share their stories. But again, it comes back to storytelling, right? It comes back to that point that you need to connect it to what's driving this climate activism and the work behind it. So you also mentioned too, like okay, let's say you've got all these videos of these people. You have to use some sort of tool in order then to fashion this into the story that you want to have in a virtual space. What are some of the key things that you think every climate activist should have in their toolbox and virtual toolbox in order to really sort of curate and cultivate their messages well on social media?
Again, it comes back to the research, one. have an open mindset too, and be as creative as you possibly could with the content that you are generating. And then it comes back to branding as well. As an activist, you have to know what your overall brand is. And you have to be able, even if you're looking to have an organization, etc., even as an individual. I realize that a lot of activists within the climate and environmental space now have like different themes that they're posting on their social media platforms. So also finding what works with you and what your audience connects with, and that in return helps to build your brand. So those are some of the key tips that I would say. I think the first thing that anyone should look at is what is the key message you're willing to cultivate to your audience, and what is your overall brand, and then begin building out your content from there, doing different videos. Right now, everyone is focusing on getting content creators to amplify their messages with their organizations as well. So again, just collaborating within the space and identifying again more opportunities that you could be engaging. I will go back to collaborations again too. So connecting with different like-minded individuals and activists within the space. I'm big on IG lives and discussing different topics. Like that's really cool. I know like within Instagram too, there's like paid partnerships and collaborations as well, where you could create like joint content with a different activist and post on your social media platforms. I find too like op-eds are really a market as well, that activists can really get their stories out there and collaborate with different persons, universities within the space to get a bigger audience. So there, when it comes to social media, the power behind that is limitless. And there's so many opportunities that we as Gen Z, we as young people could continue to amplify and continue to grow within our respective spaces.
Now you mentioned, is it op-eds?
Yes.
Can we expand a bit more on that for people in the audience that may not necessarily know what that is?
Yeah, so basically it's like a joint blog that you're writing, or a joint article with a different climate activist, or a university, or even or like business leader, companies, etc. you're willing to collaborate with. And it's like, I would not say that it is a press release, because it's more like an article or blog, but you're disseminating it to media houses, you're disseminating it to a bigger and wider platform. I remember I did an op-ed with Sophia Carson, and that went really great. And we were talking about the power of youth activism and amplifying voices. So here I was able to write this joint op-ed with an international artist. And that was also able to get lots of international attention within different international media houses as well. And that's also a different way too of like amplifying your voice as well. So as activists within our spaces, the work that we're being done should be highlighted within various press releases, within variant articles. So I would also encourage young activists who are looking to have their own organizations, climate and environmental entrepreneurs, always have a press release, always have a blog, always have a website whereby persons can see the work that you're doing and continue to track the successes of your organization or your business.
That's a good point. And I think I'll save that question for later on. The sort of the KPIs. How do I make sure that I'm actually delivering the message I want to? But on that last point where you're talking about this is a really good international artist that you've collaborated with, and you've got this op-ed and this sort of collaboration. But I'm sure some people feel like, well, I don't have access to people that are famous. I have zero access to anybody who might give me the upper hand on social media. What would be your advice to them if they're just starting and they're like, wow, Rihanna declined my conference? How do you get to that person and say, look, these are the small building blocks you can use to build your exposure?
Start a challenge.
Yeah.
I would say challenges always work on social media. So if you approach like a celebrity, I may be using Riri as a big example.
Yeah. We apologize in advance.
you do a challenge. So if you want to like collaborate with a celebrity or artist or a cause, start a campaign, start a challenge on different climate and environmental topics, the loss of biodiversity within your country, and get different young persons to share different messages, create different hashtags. That way you're building an audience, you're building a base, and you can write back and you can say, hi, after I first connected with you, I've been able to build an audience of X amount, and we've been able to reach these different countries, and our messaging is going viral on social media, and we'll really like you to join our network. So just because an influencer or celebrity says no, that shouldn't discourage you from starting. I would say find different creative ways of getting the messaging out there on your own first through different avenues. And then once you do have the audience, once you do have lots of other passionate individuals behind you, then you can write back and show the credibility and the audience that you were able to generate.
Yeah, that is a great message. It's all the baby steps. So back to going even before that, and remember, for anybody who is in the audience here with us, please feel free to leave your messages in the Q&A. Your questions, we'll get to them shortly. When you were first starting off, you were saying that you need to find that niche. You need to go and explore what's out there and then figure out what you are passionate about, compare the two, where the Venn diagram forms, that's your niche of where you can probably leave the most impact. Maybe talk us through some of that journey for you, where you found out what your niche was going to be when it came to your social media activism and your social media presence.
Well, I would say for me personally, I can only speak through the Hey Cafe, because most of my activism started more on the Hey campaign than the actual social media platform. But I mean, for the Hey campaign, it had its own individual niche of being a youth-led organization, one, and then two, focusing predominantly on climate change and the intersection that is having on people's physical health and also their mental health. So knowing the wide range of climate issues on people's physical health, from air pollution, from eco-anxiety, and so many different topics, we were able to dissect each individual interconnectedness and be able to find different messages that we can communicate to our wider audience. And by doing that, again, that was our niche, and that was how we were able to generate like a wider audience of young persons who are interested in youth advocacy and are willing to connect to different health and climate justice activists, and also those young persons who, again, are looking for opportunities. I realize now there's so many different climate and environmental organizations who actually have like opportunity trackers now, where they're highlighting opportunities for young climate activists within the space. And that's also another platform and niche market in itself, because every young person is always looking for activity. I mean, an opportunity, whether it's a young environmental professional, whether it's a young activist, or whether it's persons who are running a not-for-profit organization. And just by having a platform that showcases opportunities for persons within the space, that within itself is a niche market which we as activists have access to as well. So it's just finding those niche markets, and don't let anyone tell you, well, that's crazy, why would you want to do it? Just go for it, and you'll see that there's so many people on this earth, right, that if one person tell you no, I'm sure at least 5 persons would tell you yes when it comes to social media.
If you don't ask, you don't receive. And that is, you led beautifully into that question from Ardeen, actually. And it's about that failure, it's about that rejection, it's about that burnout that you can often feel with social media. Because when you're on social media, especially as an activist, if you're tying that social media platform to you and your persona, you are putting yourself out there for a lot of people to judge, to critique, to celebrate, to uplift, and a lot of time it can be the negative parts as well that social media has, as we know, a massive impact on people and their mental health. And obviously, if you're somebody who's not used to putting yourself out there and that comfortable approach to demonstrating what your passion is and your activism, you can face some severe backlash if there's one negative, right? We might get a million positive comments, but it could take that one negative one to really break us down. And that's that question Ardeen is asking, like, what's your view on the need to share some of those stories? Here, I remember once I learned that there's a thing called Finsta, which I had no idea of. And that is called fake Instagram, which basically you go on, it's a separate account that shows your reality in a day-to-day. Your Instagram is glamorous. Hey, I'm smiling with flowers in the background. I had a lovely day out, blah, blah, blah. What a beautiful beach in Barbados. And your Finsta is about the reality. Some days are just not great, and that's okay. So how have you been able to share some stories about the negative side of probably some of the work you do, the hardships you have to go through, without feeling that it's probably going to damage your branding, or oof, Ashley is having a tough day, things must not be good? Because people court is a different kind of court. So talk us through some of those.
Well, I would say through the foundation, again, we have to be very careful with the messaging in which we're putting out. Firstly, we focus on youth engagement. So we have to make sure that our messaging is communicating to a young audience. And the first thing with a young audience, you have to make sure that your overall brand is authentic and they believe in the work that you are doing, right? So you have to find varying mechanisms to communicate with that type of demographic. But even more broadly, let's be honest, there's so many different people out there, especially on social media, who still believes that climate change is not real, that we're not facing global warming, and that they don't see the interconnectedness that climate change has on people's health, although there is actual scientific information to back your overall advocacy journey. So what I've recognized and what I've realized is that even behind social media, there will always be those persons with fake accounts that will be writing some different message to deter you from your overall goals or what you're willing to achieve. But then it goes back to knowing your purpose and knowing what you stand for as well. I mean, to be honest, it does get hard because for other persons within the space, you can constantly be sharing a message, but you won't be seeing the traction that you would be looking for. And there will be varying failures, and different people have different connotations when it comes to what failure can be for them. And there have some people that when they experience a failure, it propels them into doing something bigger on a larger scale. Yeah. So it all depends on how you're willing to cultivate the negative setbacks that you're getting within your audience on social media into making it into more impactful messaging as well. And even when persons write different negative comments on varying social media platforms, our social media team is always ready to rebut with a positive message and some sort of fact behind the message in which we're willing to portray. So always have facts available to you, but always ready to change the platform or the demographic in which you're also targeting, because in social media, as you said, rightfully, you don't go viral in a day. So you always have to be testing to see what works. And it might work for 2 days. And then after 2 days, you might have to find a different something that would continue to work again. So with social media, there are lots of changes, but you just have to find ways with moving with the different platforms that are coming out these days. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, fully. And I was going to say that level of resilience must have been something that took you some time to probably build, right? Because if you're getting knocked down or you're like, oof, that's not working, and I put out this photo and I thought that would really get all the likes and engagement, and then Instagram algorithm just tells you no, right? So you have to then come back again and you have to innovate, and it can be really tiring. So how do you deal personally, from a personal point of view, how do you deal with those moments where you wake up and you have to do a post, and maybe it's a photo shoot, or maybe it's an activity where there are going to be cameras there for a Hey campaign, in-person event or something like that, but the last thing you want to do is get out your bed. You just want to curl up with Netflix and cereal. How do you then motivate yourself as an activist to say, I said I would do this, how do you just push through those hard times, those hard days?
You asked some really, really, really hard questions.
Sorry.
How do I mean? I have those days, like I would say all the time, man. Within this foundation, I work hard. I mean, I work really hard. And then I tell everyone, I think the best thing about COVID was being able to communicate with persons via virtual platform. And even throughout the COVID pandemic is where we saw a bigger audience within the Hey campaign as well. So I think for me, I do enjoy the virtual platform. And if it is that I have to get up out of my bed to go outside activity, the only thing that gets me out my bed, honestly, is my alarm, I would say. And knowing that I have to look appropriate for the activity. So, and even too within it all depends on the activity again, because there are different activities that you get invited to that you're extremely passionate about the subject matter. And you're like, no matter how you feel, no matter what is going on, you have to be there no matter what. And it also goes back to the persons too in which you want to connect to. So it's always again like looking for, like I would say, like those opportunities. But again, within activism, it's not about yourself. It's never about yourself. It's always about those other persons within your organization or network that are also working to advocate for certain issues that you also have to continue to show your support, because not every day you're always going to be on a high, or not every day you're always going to have the motivation to again get out of your bed. But within our space, it always goes back to the support system. And your support system goes far beyond your family. You know, it goes within your community, it goes within your organization. So as an activist, you have to be willing to get out of your bed, even if you don't want to support others who are also advocating, because there will come a time in which you would also want their support within something that you're also advocating towards or for.
Hard question, and you answered it just as eloquently as the others. So I feel I'll bring a few hard ones your way again. What about being a Caribbean woman in this space as well? So obviously we have the international heroes where climate is concerned, and you know your market might be a bit I won't say easier, but you have a larger volume of people in different countries where it's just one country, you could promote that way. We know Instagram, for instance, has a lot of rules and regulations about individual countries and how you promote that. For instance, if we're spreading across multiple different Caribbean countries, there may be different guidelines on what we can promote. And we know the good old, when you're doing activism, you get branded with, oh, this is a social value issue. It's very sensitive. Your ad might be declined or something like that, right? So international versus the Caribbean, it's a whole different ballpark, even in how we tell stories and what activism is for us on social media. What are some differences you think where we either really have really true success stories, or where we could probably learn more from other international influencers in our own sort of branding and communication?
I would say I honestly love being an activist from the Caribbean, because that within itself is a niche market.
Yeah, yeah. You found your niche already by just being Caribbean.
For sure. I live it on an island. So that within itself is a niche market. And then there's so many powerful leaders from the Caribbean already that are advocating on the international platform for the necessary climate justice and climate finance and debt relief. And it goes on like our Prime Minister of Barbados. But what I find that us as Caribbean individuals need to do more is find those ways at amplifying our voices on the international platform. I find that we tend to just regionalize our activism or our journeys, but we need to find different ways of sharing our stories to an international audience and a bigger community. And that's what I find going to different international conferences, etc., and connecting with different activists. That is what they do. They amplify their voices at an international level. And even here, they try to disseminate their information across different social media platforms. So I would say I tend to find that we limit our scope of possibilities while different international activists sees the world is their oyster. I look connecting with different persons within the space. So I would say, like, even coming from the Caribbean, we need to find those journalists. We need to find those publicists. We need to find those PR companies that could continue to push the work and our messaging that we're doing at an international level. And I would say, from my personal experience and opinion, that's where we fall down. And I think that's where we can continue. That is where we could push our voices a bit more, and the stories and how climate change is affecting our different communities and environment, to really have those stories being told at an international level as well.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And we're too bright, we're too good, we're too amazing to be stuck just in the Caribbean. So why not spread a bit further beyond that? So we're in the last few minutes of an amazing discussion. Again, if you want to sneak in a very last question for Ashley, now is your time. If not, let's really again scale it back from all that information that we heard. And again, the whole point of the session is to really sort of inspire those Gen Z activists who are probably in the session going to watch this 2 months down the line. This video will be here, evergreen, as they say. So if you had one piece of advice for somebody who has just come to you and says, look, I have all the knowledge, I have the passion, I have the sort of drive to really take and my activism to places, but I have 0 followers, I have no accounts, I don't know which sort of platform to use. What would you really if you could wrap it up into a nice neat bow? And here's another tough one for you. What would you tell that person? How would you advise that person on their social media journey?
Well, firstly, I'll start by saying each and every one of us started with a social media platform with 0 followers.
Yes.
So that should never deter you. But let's find ways at being creative. Tell me your top 3 environmental organizations, or tell me your top 3 environmental or climate activists in which you would like to highlight their stories, or look to create or cultivate different messages that they're also doing as well, but make it into your own and make it a bit unique. And then we'll work with the content in which they can create within that space, I would say. And also, again, continue to possibly like reach out to an environmental organization and ask to do an IG live, ask to do an internship, whereby you can just go into the environmental organization within your country and maybe sit down and have a chat with the executive director or different young persons who are also doing internships. But I would also say it goes way beyond your message as an activist. It also goes into your community as well. So if you can find different ways within the intersections of your community and society that you can highlight different stories within your community and within your society, that's how you will begin to grow your audience, but also make sure that you have great screen graphics for your great content materials when it comes to color and branding via your social media platforms.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ashley. And so this was an amazing discussion. Thank you so much for joining us again. I mean, like I said before, your pre-event session with us, Louise Mabulo, was amazing as well. So many inspirational nuggets there. So we really appreciate having you on again. We wish you all the best with the foundation as well as the campaign. Like I said, we have people in this conference now who are already calling you out as their mentor. So thank you so very much. And thank you for everyone who has joined us. And remember that we have another session, which surprisingly starts with the social media name TikTok, but it's not actually about social media. It's just about how you can innovate your activism as we're running out of time. So thanks so much, everyone, and see you at the next session. Bye.